weaknesses based on our comprehensive knowledge map. According to the detected knowledge weaknesses, the system delivers the most suitable learning materials, including short videos and lecture notes, which are made by our experienced and award-winning teachers. After learning the knowledge from videos and lecture notes, students receive personalized practices automatically, whether students fill in the knowledge loopholes.
Squirrel AI Learning has appointed Professor Tom Mitchell, the godfather of machine learning, Dean of School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon University, as Chief AI Officer, Dr. Ken Codinger, Professor of Human-Computer Interaction and Psychology at CMU, as Chief Learning Scientist, established Issue AI Lab with Stanford Research Institute International as primary research partner, and joint lab with CMU, and Parallel AI Adaptive Education joint lab with the Chinese Academy of Science. Squirrel AI Learning has invented the MCM system, which teaches students mode of thinking, capacity, and methodology.
And I think the skills, the abilities, the way of thinking will really help the student to benefit for all his or her life. You know, it's very difficult to make an AI system to teach abilities and thinking. But we are doing that better and better.
The Squirrel AI Intelligent Adaptation Learning System integrates the wisdom of hundreds of richly experienced teachers and education experts to create a nano-level knowledge graph. Through the correlation between the AI algorithm and the knowledge points, each child's knowledge weakness can be quickly located. Squirrel AI Learning is truly a matter of teaching thousands of people in accordance with their aptitude. Therefore, personalized education for each child's situation could surely be achieved. The 5 links of assessment, learn, practice, test, tutoring complement each other. The first step in intelligence adaptive education is to test the knowledge status of students and to construct students' portraits. Students log on to the system and select the course to enter the test. Every time a student completes a test question, the system will intelligently match his knowledge starry sky, scan the knowledge leaks, step by step, and efficiently locate each student's weak knowledge points. In such an omnipotent circumstances, each student can accurately know which knowledge points he or she has mastered, and which knowledge points have not been mastered, in a short period of time. After completing the system's pre-test, the system enters the teaching stage of knowledge points. According to the previous test's result, the system matches different learning content with each student's different learning paths to help students develop problem-solving ideas to overcome weak knowledge points. Through the empowerment of AI, the system can know the essence from a micro-knowledge point, match nanoscale knowledge points for students to trace the root cause of knowledge weaknesses, truly achieving the outcome of only learning the weak points. After comprehensive studying, the system will take students into the session of practice tests, recommending suitable examination questions for each student to help students to further consolidate the studies. The Squirrel AI system could evolve itself and discover what human teachers can't find, automatically helping students check for missing points and supplementing knowledge points to optimize a more effective learning path. After each course is completed, the system will automatically send a detailed study report to each student, telling them about the learning status today, including the extent to which the knowledge points are still not mastered, and the knowledge points are mastered, so that the students can see the picture at a glance and achieve the visualization of education. After the end of the systematic studying, the human teacher will provide one-on-one counseling to the student, responsible for answering further questions, and psychological counseling, which forms a good complement with the intelligent adaptation learning system, so that each student can learn with ease and confidence. Baishaoping Primary School is the only primary school in Baoxiyang Village, Badong District, China. Lack of high qualification teachers is still an urgent problem to be solved locally. AI adaptive learning from Squirrel AI Learning brings hopes to local students by providing equality in education. Through the changes of a month, 2 months, 3 months, students' improvement of grades, and their raising interest in learning, are what we desire to do. With no influence of time and space, each child can have a personalized learning plan, only with a laptop or computer. Every child deserves a beautiful and hopeful world, no matter where they are in the country.
我想上大学。当一名老师。
Squirrel AI Learning AI Adaptive Education will continue to strive for equality in education.
Through its artificial intelligence-based adaptive.
All right, good afternoon, and welcome to the plenary panel on how, why, what, and how of democratization of data science. And on behalf of my co-chairs, Chid and Jeff, I welcome all of you to be part of the panel. And Chid is here. Jeff, unfortunately, is in Australia, couldn't make it to the wonderful sunny Anchorage and enjoy the delights of the city. And so as we were trying to think about the panel topic for this year, and trust me, we went through a lot of deliberation, and especially with Jeff being in Australia, the time zones, and roping in Ankur and Vipin to share their perspectives and opinions, we went through a lot of different topics. And one topic that kept coming up upon us was this idea of there's a shared responsibility that we all have as data scientists, machine learning, or AI researchers, because with data comes great power, and with great power comes great responsibility. And how do we begin to think about it? The democratization is availability of data science skill, being able to harness the data at organizations, increasing the data acumen, increasing data capacity, but as well as thinking about who are the ultimate consumers of whatever insights or observations or predictions or models may produce, and are they just, are they right, are they doing it in the right framework? And something to keep in mind is the Margaret Mead Code, which I think is very relevant to us. What people say, what people do, and what people say they do are entirely different things. And that is truly a challenge to all of us as data scientists, that how do we tackle this issue of whether it's ethics and fairness, and where do we bolt it? Do we just do it at the end, oh, by the way, let's go fix it, or do we start to do it from the very beginning? So that's where we find ourselves in bringing this important topic to KDD, where we have individuals who are enhancing either the data literacy or acumen at corporations, or doing fundamental research, or working in applications from government organizations from all over the world, from different countries. And how do we begin to really think and collectively argue, collectively debate about these issues? And so we have a very compelling panel with us here, and really some noted figures. And as we were thinking through the panel topic, we also thought through who do we want in and what kind of composition we want to bring in. And as I introduced the different panelists, you would see that why each one is here and what perspectives they'll bring to fore. So the first panelist I'd like to introduce, who of course doesn't need much introduction, is Anil Jain, who is the University Distinguished Professor at Michigan State. And if we need a lesson on history of data science and its origins and pattern recognition, Anil has been doing this for the last 50 years and has contributed extensively to the fields of pattern recognition, computer vision, machine learning, and biometric recognition. Well, and clearly he has made significant contributions. His papers have a collective citations of about 200,000 and an H-index of 182. So I'm sure none of his works have escaped your attention or reading from that perspective. And if I may quote Vipin, once we got his confirmation to participate, Vipin wrote in an email, and Vipin, I'm sorry if I give away your age as a result, my own first introduction to data science in 1979, when I was a grad student in Maryland, involved reading some of your papers on the topic. So this is how profound we feel. And again, he's every distinct honor that we could imagine. He's a fellow of ACM, Fellow of IEEE, Fellow of AAAS, Fellow of SPE, Fellow of IAPR, elected to the National Academy of Engineering. Awards include Guggenheim Fellowship, Humboldt Research Award, Fulbright Fellowship, IEEE Technical Achievement Award, IAPR, Kingston Fu Prize. So not only the historical perspective and the evolution of data science and pattern recognition, I think his work in biometrics, where he's been thinking about privacy and ethics for much longer, because those were some of the artifacts of that research. So we are looking forward to your, and thank you again, Anil.
Thank you, thank you.
Please. And I'd like to, the next panelist I'd like to invite is a good friend of mine, Tina Eliasi-Rad, who's an associate professor of computer science at Northeastern University and core faculty member of Northeastern University's Network Science Institute. She, of course, needs no introduction as well. She was also the program co-chair of KDD in 2017. Tina's research has been in areas of data mining and machine learning and has spanned both theory, algorithms, and found applications in personalized search on World Wide Web, or statistical indices of search and simulation data, fraud detection, mobile app targeting, cyber situational awareness, and ethics in machine learning. And she, prior to Northeastern, she was at Rutgers, and prior to that, she was a principal investigator at Lawrence Livermore National Lab. So a lot of her research and algorithm has been deployed in production systems as well. So that's, again, a very interesting perspective of how do we, of innovation in algorithms and going all the way to deployment in production systems. But I think more recently, if you haven't seen that talk of hers, I do encourage you, Google it. The title of the talk is Just Machine Learning. And I think in that, she provides a very compelling perspective of what is just machine learning and what is just machine learning, and goes through the challenges on ethics and fairness, etc. So clearly with Tina, we'll be hopefully able to have some good perspective on the algorithmic side, the application side, the deployment side, and while doing it in a just way. So thank you, Tina. Our next panelist is Dr. Zheng. He's a vice president of JD.com and the chief data scientist of JD Digits. For those who don't know, JD.com is a large e-commerce platform and a company in China. And within JD.com, he leads the Intelligent Cities business unit as the president and as well as the managing director of Intelligent Cities research program there. And his research has been focused on big data analytics, spatio-temporal data mining, machine learning, and AI. And he has received several Best Paper awards. He's also the editor-in-chief of ACM Transactions on Intelligent Systems and Technology. He was named among the top innovators under 35 by MIT Technical Review, featured by Time Magazine for his research on urban computing, listed in the top 40 business elites under 40 in China by Fortune. And then again, we hope that the importance of his perspective on urban computing data and the ubiquity of data, what challenges there are, where is the ownership of data sitting, and how does it work in an e-commerce platform, as well as we begin to think about smart cities and urban environment where data would be pervasive, where the individuals are now seeing the outcomes of data science, either on e-commerce or in a smart city, where they are the consumers. And there is a effect of the democratization as a result that is felt. So we are hoping that's a perspective that we'll be able to have and have a dialogue with you on that. So thank you again. And last but not the least, Eric Sears, who's a senior program officer at the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. And Eric leads their grant-making program to strengthen civil liberties and civil rights in the digital age and address the social and rights-based implications of new and emerging technologies through research, policy, and practice. And Eric has previously worked at Human Rights First in New York City, at Amnesty International USA in Washington, D.C. And while he was at Amnesty, he also launched and managed the organization's campaign on counterterrorism efforts within how to reform the U.S. counterterrorism policies and establishing the crisis prevention and response program. So clearly, Eric will tell us or teach us what is the right way of doing all this. As we begin to think about the democracy of data science or democratization of data science, he will help us write the Constitution and the governing principles of that from that perspective as to what's the social right and justice. So clearly, as you would see, that we have a rounded perspective. Thank you. And clearly, as you see, that we have a rounded perspective from all the way thinking about origins of data science to innovations in algorithms and products and applications to thinking about what does an e-commerce platform or a smart city as consumers of data science may feel, and how do we need to really structure it in the right way from that perspective. So here's the format of the panel. I'll be inviting each of the panelists to come up and share their perspective in 5 minutes, and I say 5 minutes again, individually. And after that, we will have a dialogue and some questions, and then invite the audience. Our hope is that they debate, where they disagree more than they agree. And if they're tending to agree more, please ask questions that make them disagree and make them challenge each other. And let's make the next hour and a half to be a fun hour and a half where we really learn and think about what would be the next challenges. And ideally, if we can inform ourselves and have the next year's call for papers, pick on some topics from this panel that, hey, solve these problems for research, the PhD students here, I think that will be super awesome. So without further ado, Anil, please. This is the clicker.
Well, we saw this interesting infomercial. Every time you go to a conference, you learn something. So I hope they gave you $100,000 or something for us to listen to 10 minutes of this, I shouldn't call it nonsense, but data. But anyway, I think when I took my first pattern recognition course about 50 years ago as a graduate student, there was no data science, there was no machine learning, there was no data mining. It was only pattern recognition and AI. And AI folks did not believe in data. They said, data is the dirty word. Anything which works is pattern recognition. Anything which doesn't work is AI. Okay? So after doing this, all this high-level thinking, now AI is back to data, right? So first we have to agree, what is this data science? Is it really different from machine learning? Is it something unique? In fact, we are talking about this topic of democratization of data science. Unfortunately, the machine learning community beat us to that. There's a paper in August 2, 2019 issue of Science, which talks about bringing machine learning to the masses. I don't know if you saw that, anyone if you saw that. And they basically say the same thing. In fact, they use the word AI and other things, and I wasn't aware that there is a large DARPA program called Northeastern, whose goal, it's like $80 million project, whose goal is essentially to develop tools of machine learning which people can use. Because nobody outside our community has the patience. Nobody has the patience to learn the different machine learning tools or data science tools. And then at a conference like this with 500 or so papers, new tools are being proposed, which people don't agree on what are the fundamental tools of data science, right? So nobody is willing to do that, and nobody is willing to do programming, learn programming. So basically the idea is that we have to, if we want to do democratization, we really have to do a packaging so that people can use it given their data. But this is not new. Statistics has always been doing that. Remember SPSS or SAS? They always provided the statistical tools you can feed in your data, and out comes the result. The question is interpretation, right? You don't know what this package is doing for you. It's like the same thing. Now people are realizing we use deep networks, but we don't know what it is doing to your data. And so now suddenly we have new idea called interpretable AI. right? How do we interpret the output of these deep networks? So when we talk about AI or data science or machine learning, it's really we are talking about deep networks because everybody is using that. At least in the computer vision community, everybody talks about deep networks. But anyway, that's enough about that. So the second thing we notice is that a lot of social media companies are analyzing data, but where does the data come from? We are the ones who are providing the data. And when we use any tools on Google or Facebook and so on, we are not paying for it. So how are they earning the money from our data? They're monetizing your data, right? So that's what this cartoon illustrates. The sign says, the lemonade is free, but they sell your data. In fact, I was very surprised that every time I went to a session, somebody was scanning the barcode here, right? So what are they going to do with this data? Are they going to tell my employer that, this guy attended only 2 sessions out of the 3 days of conference, right? Or maybe they'll sell it to the Squirrel company, right? So we have to be very careful about that. There is no data science without data. And so if you don't have data, you're out of luck. No matter how many models you learn, you cannot do anything without the data. So the next slide, we talk about basically the personally identifiable information. This is extremely important to understand. Okay? When you are providing your data, they know everything about you. In fact, you should read this article in Nature Communications called about the privacy of anonymized data. When we talk about anonymized data, they have all the information about you except your name. Okay, that's anonymization. But this article showed just having 15 attributes about you, they know who you are. With a very high accuracy, 99% accuracy. If they can get that, they can tell which out of the 300 million Americans you are. Okay? And this has been shown earlier with the cell phone data. From the cell tower data and others, and your habits of which places you are going, or what route you are taking, they can tell you pretty much who you are. So this whole notion that the data has been anonymized is not really true. And that brings us to GDPR, which many of you may have heard of, or if you haven't heard, please read it. It's the General Data Privacy Regulation, which the European community has proposed. And that's even more restrictive than the OMB definition of Office of Management and Budget's definition of personally identifiable information. And then, since I work in surveillance and fingerprints and so on, this issue of who can you trust with your data, right? You think that there are some good citizens who will trust your data. No. I mean, you can't even trust your employer with your data. They may be collecting your data and they may be finding out whether they should charge you higher premium for health insurance, as an example. And in the name of security, we provide a lot of data. In many countries, I don't want to name it, but in many countries, a lot of data is being collected, surveillance data, basically to say we are trying to protect you. But they know all about you. They can track you where you are. Okay, with that I will stop, and now Tina will cover things.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So let's see if it will work. Great. So when I was asked to be on this panel, I went on Google to see what democratization of data is. And all the definitions I found, usually it's within the last 3-4 years, is something like this. It says, it is the notion that anyone with little or no expertise can do data science if provided ample data and user-friendly analytics tools. The first thing that jumped to me was with little to no expertise. To be honest with you, I was a little offended that, oh, you think I can just be replaced with a machine. Now, why would they want to do this, right? So the primary motivation is that there's not enough supply for the demand for data scientists. And so this should make you think about, oh, there's a commodity here, right? Supply and demand from your econ classes. And so what are the skills and expertise that data scientists provide that are in short supply? And so those are the two questions, right? So the first one is, what skills and expertise do data scientists bring to an organization? And the second one, which I didn't see anywhere anybody studying, is among those skills and expertise, how many of them can we expect to reliably automate? Nobody talks about it. And this feels to me like we're setting ourselves up for failure, right? Because we know that a lot of the skills and expertise of data scientists cannot be automated. So how are they bridging the gap? There are two ways. One is top-down. They're saying, oh, experts, you guys, us guys. Oh, sorry. Forgot about that. Commodity. We're a commodity, our skill and expertise. And then these are the two pertinent questions. One being what skills we have and which ones can be reliably automated. And then this bridging of the gap, right? And so there's this idea of top-down. We will build tools, and then non-experts will just plug and chug it, and they'll get what they want. And in fact, DARPA has a program that started about 3 years ago. You were mentioning DARPA. It's called Data-Driven Discovery for Models. Some of you may be getting funding from it. And if you just look at the abstract of that DARPA program, it says to replace data scientists, such that a subject matter expert will take the tool and use it and will not need to talk to you at all, right? So you may think, oh my gosh, there's danger here. And there is, and I'll mention one example. The other approach in terms of bridging this skills gap has been education, right? So we should teach people a little bit about probability, critical thinking, inference, right? And that's obviously a good thing, right? I'm a professor, education, yes, right? We should do that. So, but this idea that you can completely take the data scientists out and democratize data science is just weird. So let's think about this just machine learning idea and project that I have. You probably have heard about the ProPublica study of the Compass software, which is a private software that was used to assess whether somebody was going to recidivate or not. This is for pretrial disposition. And in ProPublica's study, they found that a judge actually threw out the plea deal that lawyers had come up with because an automated tool said that this guy has high risk. Can you believe that? Like, this should just like, what the, right? It's like, so this judge is saying, no, no, these lawyers, they don't know nothing because this automated tool said that this guy is high risk. Now, this automated tool is not saying anything about uncertainty, about probability, nothing. And this judge, of course, has incentives. If he does let this guy out and the guy does commit a crime, then he's probably going to show up on the front cover of New York Times, right? And he doesn't want that. The other thing is, for the incentives of this judge, is that he has a lot of caseloads, right? And your software allows him to sort through it. That's what risk assessment is, right? Good, bad, right? And so we need to really think about what part of, oops, I keep forgetting this because I have my own, what part of data science, what part of our skills and expertise we can automate reliably. Nobody, at least when I look around, is answering that. They're just saying, well, why don't we just plug and play and let's see what happens. Thank you.
Okay, so to me, what's the democratization of data science mean? It means every person can benefit from data by using data science. To achieve this goal, we need a super platform where the data is securely stored and advanced models are provided. Here, these advanced models are not fundamental machine learning algorithms like decision tree and regression. We need advanced components that can solve a domain problem directly, like traffic congestion prediction, air quality prediction model. This model can be reused by other people easily and user-friendly. More specifically, let me use one example to demonstrate my idea. Here I use urban computing example to illustrate the democratization of data science. In order for everyone to do data science in cities, we need to build a city operating system, which connects 4 layers into a loop. It connects urban sensing, urban data management, urban data analytics, and the providing service. The 4 layers into a loop for a recurrent and unobtrusive improvement on people's life and the environment. In the urban sensing layer, everyone can contribute their data to the community based on their own will. They will be notified when and where their data has been collected and what's the purpose for sharing the data. In the data management layer, we provide 6 data models to accommodate different types of data generated in cities. For each type of data model, we can define dedicate data management and machine learning model for this type of data. And also, the copyright and the security of the data is preserved. In the data analytics layer, we should provide user with advanced components, such as traffic congestion prediction, energy consumption prediction, or urban anomaly detection models. Then this model can be reused by other people. So this is the general idea of the democratization in urban computing. And to achieve this goal, we need to pay attention to 3 issues. First one is data sharing. Second one is advanced model. Third one is the ecosystem. Regarding the data sharing, we need to pay attention to copyright and data privacy. Copyright means who is the owner of the data and what is the source of the data. We have watermark technology for protecting the copyright of images, but we don't have such kind of technology for protecting spatial temporal data like trajectories. This is a true story happened to me. I released geolife trajectory data 10 years ago, and someone copied my data set and redistribute the data in the internet, pretending they are the owner of data. Because the data looks the same, so it's really hard for users to differentiate between the owner of the data and the plagiarist of the data. How can we do that? We need to protect the copyright of data shared in the city. Otherwise, no one would like to share it. And some malicious users would slightly modify your spatial temporal data, change it slightly, making the data different from yours, and then claim they own the data. So how to protect the copyright of data is an issue. Then the second thing is the privacy. The panelists have already mentioned the privacy issue. No pains, no gains. It's a trade-off between what kind of benefit you gain and what kind of privacy you pay. But here now we have a new technology to protect users' privacy when using the data. It's very common to say different companies have their own data. Almost all companies want to use other companies' data, but don't want to share their own data because of the privacy issue. But now we can deploy our platform into different companies inside their own system. We process the data with the same model by using federated learning without leaking the raw data. Then we put together the intermediate results generated by this model and the trained model to generate final results. The accuracy of the model is almost the same as putting together all the raw data. Now it's called federated learning. We have deployed such kind of technology in China, in many cities. Even in the government, there are many different divisions or departments. They have their own system, own data. There's the barrier between their data, how to break the barrier between their data. This kind of technology can be used to protect user privacy. The second thing, I said advanced model instead of preliminary or simple machine learning model, because in the market, there are many small business, small industry company that try to use machine learning model, but they don't have their own team. They don't have their own capability of building the model from the very beginning. At that moment, they need an advanced model that they can call directly to solve a problem, like traffic, like environmental protection and energy. So here, I emphasize we need to combine domain knowledge with data science instead of only using machine learning algorithm. If you know a domain, if you know the domain, you know what factor will cause a problem. For example, traffic or air pollution. What will cause air pollution? You know the factor to cause air pollution. Then you can bring together the data implying this factor. Then you can extract feature from the data. Then put the features into the model. Without the domain knowledge, you will spend a lot of time on training model. Without domain knowledge, you may design very complex structure of neural network, wasting a lot of time for training model. So combine domain knowledge with machine learning algorithm, it will not only save a lot of time for training model, design model, but also making your model even more accurate. That's very important. The third thing is ecosystem. No one can solve urban challenge by their own. No company can solve all the problems in city based on their own capability. But we cannot let every company build their own system, making a lot of data island. That means the data are not connected. But in the future, if we want to use data across different domains, how can we do that? So they need a shared foundation. This is the city operating system. Based on the same foundation, they can build their own system easily by using the components we provide. And the data are connected in the city operating system. So the system will protect copyright and the privacy issue of users, and enable everyone to join this campaign to solve urban challenges and build an ecosystem. So that's my point. Thank you.
So thank you to the organizers of the plenary session for inviting me to participate today. Let me begin by saying, in case it wasn't clear, that I'm not a computer scientist or a data scientist, but what I hope to bring to this conversation is a broader social science and policy perspective as it relates to the topic today, in addition to the view that I have as a person who actively funds in the field. So just a quick show of hands, who's familiar with the MacArthur Foundation? Have you ever heard of the MacArthur Foundation? Okay, so a fair amount of people in the room. So the MacArthur Foundation is one of the largest private foundations in the United States. We have grant making across a range of programmatic areas that we define as big bets, where we're trying to help solve specific problems or challenges in the world, like climate change globally, or thinking about criminal justice reform locally. And we also have a few areas where we have sort of long-standing commitments, including our work in Chicago, where the foundation is headquartered, as well as our commitment to journalism. I manage the programs, I manage the foundation's technology in the public interest program. And we have two areas of grant making in it. One is focused on advancing civil liberties and civil rights in the digital age. And the second is focused on addressing the social implications of artificial intelligence and related technologies through strengthening connections between research, policy, and practice. These two areas seek to contribute to creating the conditions whereby AI and other advanced technologies are developed and deployed in a way that maximizes benefits and mitigates the harms that can come from them. While the democratization and spread of data science, I think, offers the potential to help advance human well-being, I also have concerns, and I worry that that's not going to happen, or that the results are going to be mixed if we continue to see if we continue on the trajectory that we're on. Although I do have optimism as well, and I think that there's a lot of reason to be hopeful. So let me also just quickly say that I'm going to switch between talking about data science and the AI field. I hope you forgive me for that. When I talk to people in both communities, they're often talking about the same topics and the same problems and the same challenges. But apologies in advance if I create some offense to this crowd. Also, a lot of my comments are going to be reasonably U.S. specific and come from a U.S. historical experience as well. And I recognize that this is an international crowd. I hope that some of that is transferable broadly, but I want to recognize up front that there may be distinctions, and there certainly are in different contexts. So with that, let me share 3 quick thoughts that I hope will stimulate some conversation from both the group gathered here as well as the other panelists. First, I think the democratization of data science and its promise is going to fail if the diversity crisis and power imbalances in the field are not addressed. These are big, interrelated topics, but let me drill down just a little bit more. And I am going to remember to do this. Okay, great. First, I think that there has been more focus on the diversity crisis in the last couple of years, which I think is welcome, but I do not think it has highlighted enough the ways in which gender, race, and power interact, and the fact that the problem of diversity reaches beyond mere pipeline challenges. The ways in which race, gender, and power interact and the implications are well captured in a report released last year by the AI Now Institute at New York University called Discriminating Systems that I hope you will read if you haven't already. The AI Now Institute is a grantee of MacArthur for the interest of transparency. Who is defined and accepted as an expert is also, in this field, is also a kind of power. Right now, expertise in the AI and data science community is primarily defined as technical expertise. That should evolve, I think, if we want to realize the democratization of data science technologies in ways that minimize harm and maximize benefits and equity. Having experts from the social sciences, the humanities, and legal and policy domains actively engage in this community and in these conversations, I think, is crucial. Also valuing and including the expertise of people from historically marginalized communities, I think is important because they bring their lived experience to the implications of these technologies as they move and advance across different domains. Second point, a big topic of conversation when discussing the democratization of data science is how to do it in an ethical way. And while I think increased conversations around ethics is absolutely important and welcome, I don't think it's enough to contend with the challenges that exist. That's why I think it's important to extend the conversation to justice and accountability, because these framings require more of us as people, as organizations, and as societies. To whom are these technologies and those who create them accountable? How do you design and deploy data science technologies in ways that are both just and equitable? What regulation is needed to help mitigate harms and provide opportunities for redress when harm occurs? These are some of the questions we start to confront when we talk about justice and accountability. Third point, I think we need to contemplate and as we contemplate and consider the democratization of data science, I would like to see the acceleration of what we might call public interest data science. While I think there's not a ready set definition for this, I think of it as twin imperatives. Both the work that solves problems in the social domain and community with marginalized groups, as well as efforts focused on researching harms caused or exacerbated by data science technologies in order to expose harms and advance redress. I have lots of examples that I can provide in this area of what you might think of as public interest data science, but perhaps there'll be a chance to explore some of that during the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you. So thank you all for sharing your perspectives, and clearly I think as Anil and Tina, you both were talking about the risks that are posed by the packaging of data science tools and what the interpretation risks might be. And you were actually a proponent for let's package it, and then there clearly is a need from a sensing perspective, etc. So as we think about this democratization, so the question to everyone here is, what interests might be best served if we democratize data science? And what would be served by its absence? So as if we believe that this is happening, So what could be the best served and what may not be, what could be some of the risks or trade-offs that come with it?
So I think that's an interesting point. Why should we even worry about democratization? I think the reason is, just like in the statistics community earlier, people have the data, they want to analyze it and interpret it. Let's say, since I'm in a large land-grant university, we have College of Agriculture. They collect a lot of data on soya beans and growing conditions and things like that, but they just don't have the expertise in mathematical tools to learn data science. They can't even take a data science course. So how do we help them to analyze their data? And that is where tools like SPSS and similar statistical packages became available in the 70s and the 80s. And as a result, then if they ran the data through these packages, they get some output. Now the question is, how do they understand this output, and whether this particular tool they use, whether it's regression or whatever, is really applicable to the kind of data they have. And so most of the universities had a statistical consulting center where the Department of Statistics provided graduate students who will sit there and answer their questions. And I think in the similar spirit, we can provide the tools. We should generally agree what is data, what are the tools for data science. I mean, from my perspective at a high level, it's data representation or feature extraction, it's classification and clustering, right? Whether you call it machine learning or you call it data science or data mining, those are the tools which we have. So we should make these tools available, and as this article in Science said, it should be menu driven. People can play around, but there's a still question of, which particular tool is applicable for their data, and somebody has to help them. And it's not clear who will help them.
Yeah, so very good points. And then the other thing is that we all know that for our algorithms, there are lots and lots of hyperparameters. Depending on how you set it, you may get different results, right? So again, imagine that you're in front of a judge or you're in front of a doctor. I mean, I've been going around in bioethics and medical venues, and I was at NIH's bioethics program. And it may not be far along in America where the insurance company will say, I will only pay for what the machine learning algorithm says and not what your doctor says. Can you imagine that? Would you want to be that patient? Would you want your algorithm to be used on you? I don't want my algorithm to be used on me. I'd rather have an expert think about it. I have no idea.
We use Anil's algorithm.
Yeah, I mean, no, literally, we all know that when you publish a paper and you say that my algorithm is better than so-and-so and so-and-so's, right? There's lots of knobs that you have tweaked, right? And there was recently a paper that 6 out of 7 of the models, I think it was in Rexis, that they couldn't reproduce it. So perhaps we could divide what the automated tool is being used for, right? If it's being used and it will actually send somebody to jail or deny you some procedure or hiring, or maybe the bar should be higher, right? And maybe an automated tool should not be used. And in fact, this is where usually law is lagging behind technology. There's a lot of legal issues that need to be sorted out here. And I'm just scared in that the general public usually doesn't know enough about the uncertainties and all these pitfalls, right? We, again, set ourselves high. Oh, I can solve anything, right? And then we will fall hard.
If you don't mind, I'll just like to follow up on this, because the issue of legal representation of the evidence is very important. And since I work in fingerprint recognition, most convictions are based on fingerprint evidence found at a crime scene. It's only now that video surveillance data is available, so you can base the evidence on the video data. So typically, if you talk to any fingerprint expert, they will say they will only give a binary decision. Yes, these 2 fingerprints match, or these 2 fingerprints don't match. And if you question them, They say, based on my 20 years of expertise, I have never made a mistake. Okay? So about 20 years ago, I developed a model called probability of false correspondence. That is, given two fingerprints, they're essentially matched based on the landmarks in the fingerprints called minutia points. And we came up with a model, and we computed what is the probability that these two fingerprints, one with 50 minutia, another with 40 minutia, will match. And we presented this to the National Academy of Science Sackler Symposium on Forensic Science, and the chief fingerprint examiner from the FBI was there. He said, what are you talking about, this probability nonsense? We never make a mistake. Okay, then that thinking changed about 10 years ago when the National Academies had a study group on forensic evidence. And they started thinking in terms of likelihood ratio. But again, the likelihood ratio, if you look at likelihood ratio, it is unbounded, right? I mean, it varies from, 0 to 10 to the power 30. And if one algorithm, as Tina said the likelihood is 10 to the power 10, another says 10 to the power 30, what does it mean? Right? So there is a need for actually both data-driven evidence as well as the expert evidence. You cannot trust them alone. Remember, there are some situations even in medical diagnostics where a patient goes to 5 experts and there may be 2 or 3 different recommendations. That's why in the 1980s, expert systems were very popular. Oh, we have this collective wisdom from different experts, and we have a better expert system for telling whether you are suffering from gastrointestinal disease or something else. And that was the really hot topic in 1980. Okay, now that has all been replaced with deep learning. Right?
I think that, I have a couple of things to say about this. First, I think that there are an increasing number of efforts that are seeking to bring together interdisciplinary thinkers and actors to help problem solve and to help design systems and the deployment of AI technologies in a way that helps to create and advance equity and justice. And one of them, just by way of reference that I'm involved in, is called the Partnership on Artificial Intelligence. And it was started by, at the MacArthur Foundation, we fund a lot of organizations that undertake multi-stakeholder efforts in different domains, right? So whether it's thinking about climate change or other big issues, these aren't solvable by one constituency. And the Partnership on AI is interesting, I think, because it was really initiated by a group of leading AI scientists, folks who people in this room probably either work for or certainly know. Eric Horvitz from Microsoft Research, Mustafa Suleyman from DeepMind, Francesco Rossi from IBM Research, Greg Corrado from Google, and the list goes on. And what they realized is that they were coming up against a set of challenges when it came to the design of AI technologies, knowing that these were going to be deployed widely and knowing that the challenges couldn't be solved by scientists alone. And so now this community is super interesting because you have organizations like Human Rights Watch and the ACLU who have plenty to disagree with in terms of how the behavior of different kinds of technologies in certain contexts, but also realize that there's a real value add to work in partnership with computer scientists and with data scientists who are developing the technologies to help try to advance equity and justice in their use and application. The other thing, too, is just because, I work in philanthropy, I constantly hear about, new ideas from data scientists who want to democratize it or use it in ways to solve social challenges. I think that's great, but I'm always interested in what's the starting point for that problem solving. Are these problems that are being defined by the communities that are most impacted or most harmed? And if yes, how is that influencing or developing your thinking around the way technology is going to be applied to help problem solve in a given domain? And let me give you one example of a project that I think is interesting in this way, and that I think could be a template for thinking about replication as we start to see the spread of these different technologies. And that's the Safe Lab at Columbia University, which is run in part by Dr. Desmond Patton. He is trained in social work. And he works with communities in Chicago, which is MacArthur's hometown, who are grappling with very serious violence. MacArthur works in Chicago, and of course Chicago has very serious violence problems. And the communities most impacted are the ones we need to be listening to problem solve. And so instead of the Safe Lab, which Dr. Patton and others run, going in and saying, okay, we're going to apply a machine learning technique to help predict violence, they first went to the community leaders and ethnographically engaged with them, talked to them, tried to understand what the context was, what some of their challenges were around predicting violence. And then based on that, they went and looked at what kinds of technologies might help problem solve in that way. And so these are the kinds of interactions that I think we need to see more of. And we need to really be asking the question, not what's possible with technology, but what's desirable with technology.
So I believe many parts can benefit from the democratization of data science. Small business, as I mentioned, they can benefit from the democratization of data science because they need AI technology, but they don't have their own capability of building their own team. They cannot learn from very beginning for machine learning. So once we have the democratization of the data science, they can leverage the results from data scientists, leverage the data from data scientists. There are many small companies working in traditional domain. They know the domain particularly better than ours, than our AI guys. So we also need them. For AI company, they also benefit from the democratization of data science. We need to combine domain knowledge with AI and machine learning algorithms. I use one example. We actually do environmental protection, predict the air quality of China. It's a big issue in China. But at the very beginning, we barely have domain knowledge about that side. We train a model, we have very good results. We are very proud of our results. But at that moment, domain experts do not believe us. Why can you do a better job than us? How can you make it? Then we need to learn their language to explain how we make it, how we can achieve better results. Actually, I spent about 2 years learning environmental protection theory. And finally, I can teach a course in Tsinghua University for environmental protection school. And later, they believe me, you truly know us, and then we incorporate domain knowledge into our data science model. This is a true story, and finally, they believe us. And then later, they benefit from our model. Then the model has been deployed in China to forecast air quality for 300 cities in China. And this is the first big data and AI-driven model in this area. And years ago, they only used classic model, which is not very accurate and very slow. But this is a process. You have two sides have to work together side by side. And also, as we believe, professors and students can benefit from the democratization of data science because they need data. They need data to do research. Okay, it's very common to see students who are very lack of data. They went to publish good quality paper, but the results generated on small data sets may be risk. You never know whether the model truly work in a large-scale data set. But how can you build your own large-scale data set by your own? At this moment, we need a super platform, as I mentioned. We open the platform to the public that allows students and professors to try their idea, to test their algorithm and play with the data. Finally, once they succeed, they can deposit their model into the platform and let other people to use their components. Okay, that's all.
So I think this is all really exciting, right? So I guess let's assume for a second that We can package all the tools. We can make the data available. We can make data science tools available. We can enhance educational experience. And so let's assume that we have a platform that does it. So with social media, we saw that happen. Arguably, 10 years ago, social media democratized access to information, connecting the world together, sharing our pictures and status updates and everything else. And now we are facing the risk of misinformation and fake news and things like that. Well, it achieved the purpose of democratization of access to information and knowledge, but those risks, did we envision those 10 years ago? So let's say that we collectively develop the technology that does it. 10 years later, what we would be thinking about and going, oh, I wish we had done this. So what guardrails we should put so we don't find ourselves in the misinformation, fake news crisis that we're finding in social media, which started off in a good mission, a good purpose.
So maybe I can make a quick comment on this. I mean, that's part of the reason why in my opening comments, and something that MacArthur is quite focused on with our investments in this space, is that there's a very serious need for interdisciplinary research. Interdisciplinary research is hard. You can talk across each other, and disciplines often exist in silos. But when you start to incorporate the humanities and the social sciences in these conversations, you can start to look back on history and see the ways in which technology unfolded in different contexts before. You can talk to sociologists and understand how these technologies operate within social systems, and then begin to develop guardrails based on that. And I think over the course of the last 2 years, and in particular, and from the social sciences and the humanities, where we have individuals who are publishing works that I think are clarion calls for the kind of action that's needed to ensure that the unintended consequences that I'm sure everyone is worried about in this room don't unfold. I'm talking about people like Dr. Ruha Benjamin at Princeton University, who just published a book called Race After Technology, where she looks back to the Reconstruction era in the United States and the rise of Jim Crow to articulate the idea of the new algorithmic Jim Code, the ways in which racial hierarchies can be re-encoded through bad data and through different machine learning systems. We see the work of people like Safia Unja-Noble from UCLA, who has published a book recently where she articulates the idea of digital redlining. We have the work of Joy Bolamwini, who I'm sure many people in this room are familiar with, a graduate student at the MIT Media Lab and founder of the Algorithmic Justice League, who has published really important research with Timnit Gebru from Google that articulates the idea of the coded gaze, right? The ways in which facial recognition systems are biased. So I think that these are just examples of the kinds of frames that I think really elevate what's at stake for getting this right and puts it in a broader context that both encompasses data science and AI, but also looks outside of it to understand what's happening.
Yeah, so if I may follow up on that. So there are two things. Again, there's the incentive of the person who's using your algorithm to decide something, right? And then which parts of data science, machine learning, data mining, can you actually reliably automate? So for example, you were mentioning Joy and how, for example, these facial recognition systems can't detect a dark skin. We all know, at least the ones that are older, I learned it when I took my first AI class, where the US Army wanted to figure out whether a tank was camouflaged or not, and it seems like what they actually learned was whether it was cloudy or not. Right? Or recently there was some really bad science from Stanford that came out and said, oh, by just looking at your picture, I can tell whether you're gay or not, right? My deep network can tell whether you're gay or not. It seems like they learned that some photos tend to have better lighting than other photos, right? But just imagine that tool being used in a country that if you're gay, you're dead, right? Do you want that to hang over your head? I don't think so. I don't want it to hang over my head. Right? And so there are some serious issues in terms of why is somebody using your tool? What's the incentives of it? Is it that the judge has so many cases and your tool can be used for sorting? That's what classification is, right? yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. That's just sorting. Would you want that? Part of it is empathy and figuring out if you're in front of that judge, or if, God forbid, you go to a country and it says, oh, you're gay, then you're dead, right? Because somebody's tool says, oh, yeah, we can accurately detect whether you're gay from your picture. These are serious issues, right? And we need, as a community, to address them. You know, when I go out and talk to people, I say, you know, I feel like I won the lottery and it ruined my life. Because before, we were in our little offices doing our little algorithms. My first paper was in ICML. It was single track. I had 25 minutes to talk about it, right? If you've been to ICML recently, it's crazy, right? It's like we won the lottery and it ruined our lives, right? People are now using our tools. So now we have to be careful about it, right? And maybe you don't want to think about it. Maybe you're like, oh, I'm just an engineer. But as Kate Crawford said, no computer scientist can say that I'm just an engineer, because your tool can be picked up and used for nefarious reasons. And you should care.
You should ask the audience questions now.
Yeah. You need a microphone?
I don't have anything to say.
So, Anil wants to see if Vipin, you have some thoughts.
I think this is just a segue from your comment here. Listening to all of this, should we be focusing in this panel then on the what part of it? That is, are there certain things that must be democratized? Are there certain things that should be completely off democratization because the stakes are too high?
Yeah.
So is it easy for us to figure out areas where it would really benefit to have masses involved? Because there are places, I mean, the easiest thing to do is no data science, you know, no problems. But then there are no solutions as well, right? So,
yeah.
But on the other hand, we don't want to be in a situation where a machine is telling me, put in the category in which I could be shot or killed or put in jail forever, you know, and there are real possibilities.
Right, very, very good point. So I've been working with lawyers and the courts in Massachusetts. And so, for example, in America, for pretrial disposition or bail, there are two questions, right? Flight risk and dangerousness. Perhaps flight risk is something that we can automate, right? Did I take Tina's passport away? How long has Tina been living here? Does she work here? Does she have a lot of friends here? But when it comes to dangerousness, that's very difficult, right? Maybe the bar should be a lot higher, right? Tina is not a white male, so I don't know, you know, right? Maybe she may be dangerous, right? And so there are things that either the bar should be a lot higher in using an automated tool or not at all, right? And then there is this question of, for us, right, what are the skills and expertise that we bring and which ones, again, can be reliably automated, right? And even if they can be reliably automated, are we actually learning for that task or not, right? I was talking to the person at IBM, and they were trying to fix their facial recognition software. And he's like, I think it has to do with black hair. I'm like, really? You think that you can't find the person's face because of black hair? You know, it just doesn't seem right, right? So there's a lot of introspection that we need to do here, and I appreciate the comment.
So I think we are sort of talking about two different things, because under what situation we should use data science or machine learning. So, you know, that's something which we cannot control, right? I mean, just the ethics of using data science, whether we should build a classifier which will say what is my ethnicity, or what is whether it's gay or non-gay, and so on, right? Because every system makes an error. Okay, there's no perfect machine learning system. What are the consequences of making those errors? So I think that's beyond this panel, whether we should work on certain problems.
Oh, I disagree. Right? I disagree.
Well, I think, you know, even we disagree, but it doesn't stop from any company selling it to the CIA or the government, whether just the US government or any other government, that I can do this.
We are citizens of this country, right? So I should have a voice on whether an automated tool is going to be used on me to decide whether I can have a particular procedure or not.
Sure.
So as part of that, so I am introducing a class at Northeastern. The title is Algorithms That Affect Our Lives. And it should be, I'm pushing for it to be mandatory for all undergraduates at Northeastern. That means no math prerequisite except for high school, to try to teach them these tools and apps that they use, how do they work, right? Now this is difficult because it's just high school math. But to try to describe to them, like what you were saying about how your data is being used, how does Facebook make money, right? We all know that we have heard these stories. You know, I didn't type it anywhere, but now I'm getting this, this ad about something, right? Is that just coincidence, or is it really something going on? And I think that it's up to us to teach the citizens of our countries what is going on, because these are being used to make decisions about them.
So are there then certain, to going back to the question that from Vipin as well is, and are there then certain applications that we should be thinking about as a, is it you were talking about from an urban sensing perspective, that let's say if we could have these sensors that tell us about climate and the environmental impact and the quality of air, etc. Are there certain applications that become a more, democratization process versus others we say, hey, let's sort of put some strict guardrails around it?
Yeah, okay. So for urban sensing, you can enable 4 kinds of applications. First one is for resource allocation in urbans. For example, if we want to deploy charging station for electrical vehicles, where should we deploy these charging stations? How to select locations? Actually, this can be turned into a maximal K-carry problem over trajectory data generated by electrical vehicles. So once you have trajectory data from different electrical vehicles, you can do the data science, and then you find the location, and then you suggest them to the experts. But it's not over yet, because they have to incorporate domain knowledge. There are many other factors you need to consider, not only the coverage issue. And then you turn it around, you make it happen. The second thing is, we can obtain some sample from the city. The data we obtain is always a sample of data. And sometimes the sample is biased. Let me give you one example. We can collect GPS trajectories generated by taxi cabs, which is only a sample of the entire traffic volume. And the distribution of taxi cabs may be very different from the distribution of the entire traffic. On some road segment, we may observe many taxi cabs, but very few private cars. On the other segment, we may observe few taxi cabs, but very many private cars. So you can simply derive the true knowledge of the entire data set from the bias distribution, or from the bias samples. So how can we, for example, how can we derive the traffic volume of the entire route network by using the taxi cab data? That's a challenge, and it's a problem. Using the data science, we can solve this problem. Based on bias sample, we can still get true knowledge. Second application. Third one is, we always deal with data sparsity issue in cities. We have a limited sensor deployed in cities. IoT data is very limited. We're trying to infer the fine-grained information based on limited resource data and try to infer the information throughout the entire city. For example, air quality or even some other prediction, volume prediction. How can you do that? Now, based on the air quality data from the station and plus other data sources like point of interest data, meteorological data, and even social media data, put them together, we can infer the fine-grained air quality of each 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer grid throughout the entire city. This is called data sparsity problem we can solve. And the last one is data missing. Data sparsity is different from data missing. Data missing means even if you have a sensor deployed, you may still lose data from the sensor because of the communication error or device error. How can you fill the missing value of this sensor data? It's very important. The sensor can be temperature, can be humidity, can be gas consumption, energy consumption information. Infer the missing value is fairly important for our lives. So the 4 categories of applications can be enabled by urban sensing and combined with democratization of data science.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Yes, please.
So I would like to question the definition of democratization of data science that has been used so far, because it's been very focused on a particular, mostly urban, developed world kind of applications. And this reminds me of the current discussion going on in science about the colonization of science, essentially. So if this paradigm assumes that scientists in a very limited set of countries, data scientists, are developing the solutions and exporting them to the rest of the world to solve the rest of the world's problems, where people who are not trained as data scientists can use them and apply them directly to the problems that are of concern to them. So how do we democratize data science in a way where it's not about untrained data scientists being able to use these solutions developed in some very limited set of countries, but where data science approaches can be used to solve problems everywhere in the world where people are trained as data scientists and can define their own problems and apply and develop and apply those solutions.
Yeah.
So it's not just in the other parts of the world, even in the United States, this location problem based on the urban data is being used by some of the department stores. For example, is a dollar store or whatever, that's the fastest growing store. And they're going into the most poor areas, okay? And when they go there, they wipe out all the local merchants, okay? And dollar store doesn't sell any fresh fruits and vegetables, okay? So as a result, now these poor people are not getting any fresh fruits and vegetables, and they have to go 50 miles, and they don't have a car. And so this, I thought, even though we may have good intention of collecting sensor data in different areas, it can be misutilized. Same thing with the surveillance. If we identify some high crime areas, that's where most of the surveillance cameras are. And as a result, most of the arrests are made in the poor areas, economically deprived areas. And so this vicious cycle just permeates. So even though we can claim that surveillance is a good idea, we very well know, even in this country, that there are problems when you start talking about surveillance. And that's what I meant. In other parts of the world, surveillance is being misused. So now the question is, should we stop working in face recognition? And the people who build the engines are essentially the most powerful engines are built by the social media companies because they have all our faces to train the system, right? And by the way, if you're working in face recognition, there'll be further lack of data. IBM has been criticized because you may know that. I mean, they posted some data crawled from the web. And now they are realizing that they didn't have the proper permission. Duke and Stanford collected the data. For example, one of the places, they put a surveillance camera on top of the building and started collecting people walking around without getting the user consent. And so that's becoming a serious problem. The state of Illinois has the most restrictive biometric usage law. Nobody knows that. And under that, now, a lot of companies, including Facebook, are being litigated because they use somebody's data, face data, who did not have an account on Facebook. But his friends took a group photo and then posted it, and it was tagged by Facebook, and it was being used to train the system. So it doesn't mean we should stop working in face recognition.
So I completely agree with what you said. I think we should have a bigger discussion on what's the definition of democratizing data science. I think in general, like democratizing X, you're like, oh, that sounds good, let's do it, right? But nobody wants to democratize, I don't know, neurosurgery or whatever, right? So, or mathematics, you can't do it, as Gödel showed, right? And that was Hilbert's dream. So, but this issue, so far, when I was doing my search for this panel, basically it's that you automate machine learning and you sprinkle a little or no education, and then we'll be good, right? And that's horrible. And so we need to have a serious discussion about what democratizing data science actually means and whether it's good or bad, right? As we've been saying, that it's probably a bad thing as it is now. Yes.
So can I just add one quick thought on that?
Go ahead.
Sorry. So I would say that an important element of democratization that I feel like is overlooked, where the data science community, I think, has significant expertise to contribute is the ability to actually be able to document and understand harms that potentially come out of data-driven systems, and the ability to forensically investigate the systems in order to understand if there are laws that are being broken or if there are new policies that need to be developed. Unfortunately, a lot of these systems, as everyone knows in this room, are being built on top of, are proprietary. So there's, legal risk and even thinking about investigating them from a public interest perspective. But there's also the need to have a more sophisticated tool set to be able to engage in different kinds of forensic investigation. So, the ProPublica series that Julia Angwin published that Tina referenced, I feel like part of the reason why it has staying power is because it's so hard to do this kind of accountability work right now. MacArthur is very proud to have supported Julia's work at ProPublica, and we're supporting the new journalism shop she's involved in called The Markup. And I think that the kind of work that they do, the kind of work that public interest researchers do, is especially hard in this context because there's still a lot of learning and figuring out how to conduct investigations, and there's real legal risk as well. So I think when we're thinking about democratization, we need a really steady focus on accountability issues and the ability to kind of to conduct investigations to understand where there might be different kinds of harms.
Okay. Let's get one more question from the audience, and we can come to you. Do you have a quick remark?
Okay, one sentence. I totally agree with you. So the democratization of data science that only means we train students or people to learn data science, but also we need to enable other people outside this community to use data science and push through data science into traditional domain to solve their own problem. It's really hard to require people working on traditional domain to learn our algorithm model. And according to my experience, it's relatively easy for us to step out, to learn something from them. We don't need to go that deep because the model will help out a lot. But if you require them to learn our model, it will be very slow. So I totally agree with you. The later may be a bigger space to discuss. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. It's all about a little bit about perspective. We take the perspective of data and being misused by large organizations of us, and the fear of the misuse of my data by companies, by algorithms, by data scientists that make algorithms that is being used by many companies. I want to make a perspective within a large organization. When I think about democratization of data science, I think on, okay, if a data science without domain knowledge does things with algorithms, then things go wrong because he is mostly not responsible or not very knowledgeable about the domain in which he's in. I work for a bank, and our data scientists come up with models that do not make sense. But as we started up a platform to give the guys and the women that are responsible for the actions within the organization, the tools to apply machine learning and artificial intelligence on their data and being responsible for the outcome and educate them to do so, I think that's the go. And then the data science, as we know it, I coin it within my company, not even data science anymore, what we do in our business line, but decision engineering, and aligned with you, and bringing in decision management theories and data knowledge and data science together. That should bring it. So the role of the data science should not be the one who does the reasoning or the actionability in the real world. That should be the business, and they should be responsible and knowledgeable, because that's a thing that comes with that.
Yeah, so it comes back to incentives. I attended the Citibank Fair Lending Summit because we were celebrating the 50 years since the Fair Lending Act was passed. And so that you're using, usually when they decide whether you get mortgage or not, they're using data that's full of biases, right? And so my algorithm, it's really nice and beautiful and not a racist, and then it sees your data and it's awful, right? We saw with Microsoft and the bot that they had put out. the Tay bot. So, I mean, and for example, banks use third-party scores like FICO scores. They don't know what the hell is going on. And so, really, when the rubber hits the road, a human needs to be involved, also in terms of liability, right, which we still have to sort out in this country, in terms of who is responsible, right?
Yeah. That's a great one. The FICO scores are very wrong, by the way. You should not use them because that's something you do not know what's in it. You should be knowledgeable as a business. You should take responsibility. And it is not true that if data scientists are involved, that it's becoming better models. They're technical better, but not business-wise better. So I'm striving for everybody in the business becoming data-driven and even able to do machine learning on.
Right, and in fact, it's worse because if you look at the data science literature, for example, all the ML stuff, right, fairness, accountability, and transparency, all that they're doing is they're fiddling with statistical parity performance measures, but they're not looking at what the task was. Some of them are looking at the data and like somehow I'm going to magically transform my data into this other embedding space that's everything's going to be fair, right? Which, what? Right, and so and Tom Mitchell was mentioned up front. His seminal 1997 book. In that book, he defines the well-posed learning problem as a triple. You have a task, you have experience or data, and you have performance measures, right? And if you want to do the right thing, you have to have the normative considerations of what you ought to do in both the task, the performance measure, and the experience, right? But usually the task is, oh no, look, just classification, risk assessment. Or ranking. Why? Because we know a lot about them, right? We don't want to do virtue ethics. We need to do virtue ethics here.
Yeah. So totally agree.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's get the next question, please.
Jake Chim from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Thank you. I think I've already sensed the sentiment that there is something wrong with the question. Let me dramatize this and ask you back. So I wonder if this is the right question to say that we should democratize data science. If you replace data science with the technology that we all know are powerful, nuclear power, should we even ask the question, should we democratize nuclear power? The reason I'm asking this is that with every technology, there's a phase expansion, and then there's a phase that needs to be controlled. I think the data science right now is booming, and that's great, and maybe the technologists are coming over and taking control over the decision maker who are not supposed to make the right decisions. But at the same time, is it really good to have everyone to know the nuances of knowledge is out there? For example, in Anchorage, I know every day there's an earthquake, but if you say, well, I can predict that in 35 minutes there's an earthquake, is it necessarily good? Some people may say, well, that's good for you because you can go away and then hide in the place, but then maybe there are some people are going to actually say, I'm going to wait at that moment and go to Walmart and do some harm. And then some people are going to actually go into the financial market. You cannot control that. So we can increase the technology, but maybe not to democratize this technology to the point of without control. Having said that comment, I came from the medical field. I noticed that none of your panelists actually have a medical background. We have gone through phases like Tuskegee man, and then there are lots of ethical issues. So the medical field have become very much conscious on what technology potentially that we should actually control. There's a CRISPR-Cas9 technology that actually can change the genome. The way that we control it is to say, even though potentially it can save lives, people with genetic disease, but let's not temper our embryo. Right? Let's only do that gene transfer for the adult cells, and then to do it in a very slow way. And Lettuce has an internal review board, IRB, that self-regulate. So I wonder if the panelists think that it is the honors of this community to actually come with a self-regulating policy and maybe control board to say what kind of a data science application our community should accept. Or should we actually give the control to maybe the government agency or Google who are self-regulating?
Who wants to go on it?
Okay, let me Thank you for bringing the concern. It's a very good question. It really depends, I think. If you only benefit from the knowledge generated purely from your own data set, it's okay. I think it's okay. But if you benefit from the knowledge generated from not only your data set, but other people's data sets, and also other companies' data sets, it depends on the task. We need to look at it case by case. You are not always allowed to share the results or play your algorithm with the data. So this does not break the definition of democratization of data science. Democratization of data science does not mean you can use all the data freely. We never say that. You have to have a control and case-by-case regulation. I say the data is securely stored and privacy is protected in the platform. So I think this is a good point. We can mention more. Yeah.
I think we should just move on. There's a long line of questions.
Let's get the next question there.
Yeah.
Thank you for the discussion so far. Since you asked us to be a bit provocative, I'll try my best. So, frankly, I'm a bit confused with all the discussion that is happening. It feels to me you have projected data science as being something where you create a model and then you let it out in the loose and then let it do whatever it wants to do. That's not how data science works. Model building data science is an iterative process. There's always a human in the loop. You roll out a model, you see what your model is doing, you study the outcome of that model in your ecosystem, then you tweak, right? Like if, for instance, if there is an ethics issue and you really care about it, there is no reason for you to measure whether the data science model is amplifying the bias in your model or not, and put a constraint in your model so that it does not do that. And if you don't use data, there is no reason to believe that you will be more ethical than if you use the data. So it seems to me data science, the way you have projected it, is as if we have reached the age of artificial general intelligence when we are actually very far away from that. So I'm actually not very sure what we are discussing here. It's an iterative process, right?
So we haven't democratized it effectively because some people didn't understand quite. So the panel has the onus.
If you do a search on democratizing data science, that phrase, for example, or if you go to that DARPA program, as I said, it actually says replace data scientists. Now you may say, look, that's moot, it's never going to happen. But the point is that if I am a company or whatever else, and I can't afford to hire data scientists because of the supply demand, and somebody is saying, oh yeah, you can just use my tool, you don't need any data scientists, and they use it and they make a decision, that's bad, right? So, and part of it is that there's this hype about data science. So you, of course, you're like, look, you cannot get rid of the data scientist, you cannot get rid of the subject matter expert, we all have to work together hand in hand. But there's this whole movement from industry I found when I was doing the research in terms of, look, there's supply demand, I can't get a data scientist, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this automated tool and, do some whatever, and then that will be it. I don't need to have any access to a data scientist. That's the issue, right? And we should say that is dangerous. Right, because it's going to come back and haunt us.
Yeah, but it never happens that way. Even if I'm a domain expert with no knowledge of data science, I'm not going to let the system do whatever the hell it wants to do, right?
Of course,
I'm always going to measure what it's doing, and then I'm going to adjust, right? And I think if there is a tool where I can't adjust things based on what's happening, then I'm not going to use that tool. As simple as that. Like, I'm not going to be a responsible doctor, right? And so
let me, can I respond to that really briefly?
Sure.
Sorry.
Well, the next person
so thank you for being provocative. Well done. I think, let me try to respond to this. I actually want to challenge a little bit your human in the loop claim, because I think that that's not necessarily always the case. I guess it depends on how you define it. Maybe we should talk more about it after the panel. But let me tell you really quickly about some research that has been conducted by sociologists that I find pretty troubling in the police field. So there's been this explosion in the use of predictive policing technologies around the United States and presumably in different parts of the world. And there are studies showing how these systems are ripe with different challenges, and a lot of it relates to the data, right, that is generated by the police department, which comes with a certain kinds of bias and discrimination, et cetera. I mean, you can essentially draw a through line from this year. We're celebrating the not celebrating, sorry, that's a horrible way to cast it, but this year we're marking the anniversary of 400 years since the first slave ship arrived to this country. And I think that you can draw a through line from the slave ships that arrived in this country 400 years ago to policing data today. It's been a system of systematic oppression and discrimination against certain populations of people. That data is being fed into a system that's making predictions for where police should engage in surveillance or different kinds of policing. And what recent sociology research has uncovered is that this interesting bifurcation whereby older beat cops in LA in particular are very skeptical of these systems, but younger generations who grew up looking at their phones, right, all the time, just believe what the system is telling them. Oh, I should go here, I shouldn't question that, right? So one has to begin to wonder the extent to which we're going to enjoy, humans making active discernment or judgment in what computers are telling them. So I think we have to be really careful about the presumption of humans in the loop.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I think from what I see from the conference, so I learned it's like data science is actually turning into a new skills that we can actually use it to learn new knowledge. So just like mathematics, physics, or any other domain knowledge is just the one way to acquire new knowledge. So I think if we see the data science the democratization in this way, as we are acquired a new tool or more efficient tool to learn new knowledge, I think from this perspective, then we see what's going on in 50 years or 100 years later, what the people will think about this. So in that sense, is some of our concerns we have right now, is that a real problem? Or is something that really good, we think is good, is also really that good? So this my thinking on that. So if we projecting 100 years later, what will be? So
it's not 100 years. So again, like the tools that are being used for predictive policing that he was saying, or in Pennsylvania, there's a software that's being used to flag for child protective services. I mean, the tools are being used. It's just a matter of, whether we should raise a flag that you shouldn't just use the tool without actually knowing what's going on. And so, and you putting yourself in a position that I'm a citizen of this country and I have a voice and I should use it because I know the tools and I know how they can be misused.
So there is an organization called Concerned Scientists or Society of Concerned Scientists who raise these ethical issues about, I mean, you could say, I don't want to take any money from DARPA because eventually that technology will be used by the military. So without going into that aspects, I mean, the way I understood this panel, democratization of data science, was that, let's say, as I mentioned, an agricultural scientist who has collected a lot of data on soybeans, right? And he wants to analyze this data to predict growth of the soybeans based on the weather and soil conditions and so on. But he doesn't know the data science tools. And somebody told him, hey, why don't you use the data science tools? Now he has the domain knowledge, or his other team in that department has the data domain knowledge, but he needs tools, right? So the question is there some way this community can provide the tools? And, and that's what, to me, that's what this panel is about. But there is still the question of, which we have talked about, the issue of, he applies the tools. Now, which tool should he apply? Now, that is something which cannot be automated, right? I mean, should he use a linear model, non-linear model, which order model you use? How do you democratize that? And that's really the challenge. Maybe it cannot be democratized.
Yes.
I have a question about like privacy and asking for permissions from an individual. So in some situations like Genome Project, like if I don't give the permission, but all my cousins just go and map their genome, then I'm in trouble. Like although I didn't give permission, but they have most of the data that they would need to track me. So like I would like to see your guys' perspective on like group permissions, right? Like not just individual permissions, because yeah, like we are very similar, and like as long as our friends or our family agree towards certain things, I don't have an option anymore.
Yeah, the power of social networks. Have you seen papers here? It's all about that, right? It's about how we find the relational dependencies in social networks. I mean, some of those, there was the recent case in California, right, where they caught some guy through the use of this kind of genetic testing. And so, again, some of these questions are legal issues that just have to go through the courts. And some of it is, again, us as citizens educating people about how the tools work, and then having the general public vote for it, right? Because you can pick your representatives who make the laws, right?
So, but Anil, to that question, there's the same precedent of what you were talking about, the restrictive laws in Illinois, where I was in a group picture where I didn't consent for my picture to be put on Facebook. Why is it on Facebook? It's the same thing apply here.
No, this is different, because in the Illinois privacy law, your data is being collected. Now the question is, they have in this case, the question is, which the police uses familial information, is that a crime was committed, okay, and they collected some DNA from the crime scene. They have a suspect in mind, but they don't have the details of the suspect, okay? So now they say, okay, I can go to the relatives of that suspect, collect the DNA from the relatives, not from the person.
Yeah.
And then use that to find out, confirm whether the person of interest is really the one who committed the crime. So there is a difference in the scenario here.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question that I think is primarily for Eric, but maybe the other panelists will want to weigh in as well. I love the model that you put forward for public interest data science that starts with the needs of marginalized communities and really meaningfully involves them. But I also realize that the organizations and institutions where data science is currently happening don't really have those relationships established and don't really have the expertise and the capacity to do that kind of work at the moment. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you think what kinds of transformations need to happen within our organizations and institutions to enable that kind of work to go forward.
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. It's like I planted it. Because there's work underway. So, I mean, I think that there is a lot of opportunity actually to build up. I mean, a lot of what MacArthur is interested in the technology and the public interest program is field building and field strengthening, right? And so one of the big interests of ours is thinking about how to create more networked connections. So just to give you a few examples of where that's happening, I mean, I think the simple answer is it's reasonably nascent. But there's promising examples out there. So just to give you two really quickly, one that has its origins in Tina's hometown of Boston, and that is there's a new organization that's been launched called. It started out as a conference, as often happens, and has grown into an organization now called Data for Black Lives. And one of the primary purposes of Data for Black Lives is to create stronger connections between data scientists and black communities across the U.S. who are struggling with questions related to justice in their community, to both see the ways in which data science can help address some of the challenges that they're confronting, as well as using data science expertise to help raise critical questions around the ways in which these technologies are being deployed. Another example is out of Philadelphia. There's an organization called the Media Mobilizing Project that's run by Brian Mercer, and Hannah Sassaman there as well is quite involved in this effort. And they're actually in the very early stages of starting to build out a model that they tested in Philadelphia that's worked quite well, that's similar to Data for Black Lives, but that's looking to link community groups with data scientists to try to better enable community-based governance over the ways in which technologies are being used and deployed. So I think things are still new and in development, but we're starting to see these kinds of linkages that I think are going to be really significant and important going forward. And also there's a number of interdisciplinary research institutions that are university-based that sort of do this kind of work as well. But I'm happy to talk more about this later here, or I'm on the internet. You can find me.
Yeah, there are lots of them. There's like Data for Democracy with Jonathan Morgan, that data scientists volunteer their time.
So basically we are talking about two broad things: data science for the social good and data science for evil things. Right? I mean, really, that boils down to that.
And both lead to each other, right?
Well, the dictum holds true, right? The technology is neither good
nor
same thing, nor is it neutral, right?
So surveillance is not all bad. Surveillance for your welfare and surveillance to track you.
Yep.
So.
Hi, thank you all. Pardon my nerves if I have them. My question is sort of generally about values. So we know that data is not value-free, nor obviously are people, like the people who may order up a given algorithm, or engineers tend to maybe in the past have sort of disavowed values in their work as technologists. So my question is, what efforts do you know of that are being done to develop methods to audit the values of algorithms? I know that, to borrow something from Bin Kim of Google, one of the goals of explainable machine learning is to ensure that our values were learned by the artificial intelligence solution. And it seems like an interesting sort of a journalistic pursuit almost to audit the values of AI. But it's not a conversation that we have very often. Do you know of any forums where this kind of work is being done? Or do you have suggestions or recommendations for such a forum?
Go ahead, Eric.
I wanted to let the computer scientists talk first.
No, go ahead.
Since it's, so I think that's a terrific question. I think that one place where this is starting to happen is an organization that I mentioned earlier called the Partnership on AI, which is this interdisciplinary group of people and organizations who are ultimately working to try to create and establish different kinds of best practices in the AI field that's informed from a multiplicity of perspectives. I think there's also probably a lot to learn from the work that has been done by Batya Friedman and others. There was a book that was just published this spring, actually. I feel like I'm generating a summer reading list a little bit for the rest of summer, but it's called Value Sensitive Design. So that's a very methodical approach to thinking about how to embed values in the kinds of technologies that you're building. As a side note, Batya wrote, along with Helen Nissenbaum, I think maybe one of the earlier papers, sort of expressing and articulating concerns around algorithmic bias in 1996. That paper I don't think got a lot of attention at the time, probably because it was two women writing it, unfortunately, in the field.
Well,
when there was even less representation.
They didn't use the term
algorithm.
Computer systems.
But at any rate, she's someone who has been thinking about these issues for a long time and has published kind of and written about frameworks that might interest you.
Yeah, Helen Nissenbaum is at Cornell Tech. She's great in terms of this. So valuefordesign.org if you go there.
One of the reasons that I asked, and not to take up too much more time, is because one definition of democracy that wasn't really brought up is that an element of democracy is earning the trust of most of the people, or some variant of that. And so, in a democracy, I guess in the United States democracy, ostensibly, the values reflected in the systems are the values reflected by the majority more or less, and then we try to federate power as much as we can in order to mitigate, that effect. So, I don't know. I guess that's why I asked the question. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a good question.
Thank you. It's a great question.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Wilkerson. As I was listening to the discussion, I was wondering if we can change the titles a little bit different, as in why and what and how we can democratize data science knowledge. I'll give you an example. My daughter, 10-year-old, she asked for a phone, and I bought the phone, I gave it to her. But she has to give me a writing of how is this technology going to make her life better, and what are the risks of this technology. What I'm trying to get to is I want the young generation to really make it a norm to ask the question and saying that, great, I'm going to embrace technology, but I'm always going to ask the question of, what are the 20%, what are the unfairness that is happening. So as a data scientist, I was wondering if we can just take on that responsibility of saying that, don't just say that my model is great, I'm going to save life, I'm going to do all this stuff. But can we just be a little bit honest and be a little bit transparent and say, by the way, there's 10% chance we're going to cause this harm. So my vision is, I think we should invest in the young generation and make it a norm for them to always ask these questions, embrace technology, but make it a norm to ask the question of tell me where it doesn't work. Because if you know data science, you will know that it is not a bulletproof prediction, right? So that's just my comments.
Thank you.
Agreed. Education, good thing. Yeah.
Yes, please.
So I do want to follow up on Deepa's point, because a couple of months ago, actually, Andrew Moore from Google said democratizing models and data is very good. And I agree it is for the corporate world when you have tons of people getting the same data, accessing the same data, with different objectives, each group. But at the end of the day, trying to push on business KPIs. But the key difference is that you had a set of stakeholders, so you got business partners you need to, you got a partner together, and there are some check-ins. So some peer reviews. So even if you want to take, it depends a lot of which decision you're going to make. Predicting something is kind of meaningless, but it's simple, it's easy really. The real question is what you're going to do with that prediction. So it's like, it always comes to, if I had that prediction, and what will be the counterfactual if I don't have it? So if I take low-level decisions, okay, I'm going to show an ad which is not relevant, who cares? You can make errors. But if somebody's going to die because I make a false positive, then it's a big deal. So from a corporate point of view, usually higher level decisions are taken even with scientific experiments running for a couple of months. So it's not a simple decision. So my point is, probably a question for you guys is, I used to work also in the medical domain, doing image analysis for medical diagnosis. But it's not like you diagnose something and, the doctor states that and make a decision based on that. But it takes years because we have a strong agency called FDA who comes and say it goes, it doesn't go, and a bunch of checklists that you need to fulfill to get this out there. And that is equivalent to the typical check-ins you get in the corporate world for some of your algorithms to go out there. Isn't that the case here, that an equivalent agency that will check in for the justice system to say, hey, this is an algorithm, it's cool, but we are just putting algorithms without any check-in, and there is no experts checking this for years to make sure this is doing the right thing. So isn't that going back to the safeguards, isn't that there are certain domains that require that level of check-in where these tools could be valuable, but it needs a lot of iteration and a lot of development. And there are others, like the small business case. You're going to make errors because you had a non-expert using out-of-the-box models. But at the end of the day, you're a startup, so it's better you make less errors than more errors if you don't have the tools. So, but if the startup is just selling things, and you're making a bad recommendation, but nobody is going to die.
Well, clearly we don't have uniform laws, right? So forget about somebody dying. When Google labels an African-American lady as a gorilla, that's a huge loss for them, right? And so there's no uniform laws, but the question is, what is the right distribution, right? And there are people, I think there was one of the questions in that, for example, doctors and lawyers have to take an oath. So should data scientists take an oath that we're going to do well? You know, I don't know. You know, I'm talking to ethicists, but so there are lots of these issues, but a priori, usually you don't know the loss.
Yeah,
so
isn't that to take an algorithm to the justice systems, we need an agency that checks that out and makes sure that is the right thing to do before deploying that?
Yeah, I'm up for it. Yes, I'm all for it. Yeah.
I think we have time for one last question.
Okay, so I've heard a couple of you say that maybe especially Tina, that we need guardrails, right? Many things can go wrong, not in 100 years, but they're going wrong now already.
Well, not for you. You're a white male. Things are perfect for you. You won the lottery of
okay,
life.
Great.
I just want to point that out.
So I guess also in some cases the solutions, they can be technological. Maybe in other cases they should be actually written in the law. So how are we going to achieve these guardrails is my question. Maybe you have an opinion on that.
I'm sorry.
So how are we going to prevent that data science is used for evil? Is there some things that we can do?
So what we need to do is educate the public. They will go and hopefully pick representatives who will pass the correct laws. And if we don't like them, we will elect other representatives. This is a slow process, right? And for now, there's no checks or balances. And, you know, and God knows here in America, our representatives in Congress know nothing about technology. In fact, I think we as a community relish behind all the complexity in our technology, and that's the wrong thing, because we need to teach the public when they use these tools, what are the good things and what are the bad things. Privacy, there's utility, there's, you know, if you're a white male, you don't have to worry about it, but if you're not, you may have to worry about it, right? There are lots of things. And then us as algorithm designers, we should put ourselves in the shoes of somebody that this algorithm may be used for, that is not us, right? You need to have empathy. What if you are standing in front of that judge? And would you want your algorithm to be used on you? Right?
I totally agree with everything that Tina said. I think that law and policy development is a slow process. It's a super important one in this context. I think that, you know, efforts to popularize and discuss meaningful ethical constraints, professional constraints are an important thing. I think that ethics washing is a real thing as well in industry that we need to guard against and be aware of. And also, you know, I think that I'm encouraged by the rise of activism that I see in the tech industry. The fact that there are people at different companies who are standing up and saying no to the deployment and use of different technologies that they're developing and are raising critical questions and challenging leadership when they believe that unjust decisions or unethical decisions are being made. So I think there's not one solution, but it's going to be a mix of solutions. But I think we're at a really exciting and pivotal moment for the field.
Thank you.
So thanks for scaring everyone.
You are still standing.
I've still not panicked. Well, the objective here was to do exactly this. So I think you guys accomplished a very grand goal. It was to get everyone's mind to open up, to question the fundamentals of the science that we are developing together as a community. And I think the panel has achieved that goal to a very great, successful extent. So while we may feel that there are a lot of unanswered questions, I just want to end on a very positive question that for the panel, which is, give us some hope. Give us some examples of things that we are probably doing right. And I'm sure there are many things we are doing right. Otherwise, 3,000 people wouldn't show up to a conference about data science. So leave us on a happy ending.
And I'll ask each one for 30 seconds
Okay, start. We're making a lot of money for people.
You're the correct example. You have a startup.
Yeah. It's money.
You?
No comment, sorry.
Eric?
So I tried to give some examples that would illustrate optimism, but look, in some ways I want to turn the question on its head and say that we're actually doing something positive by thinking critically about the field, by ensuring that voices that are historically not incorporated and marginalized from the field are included and are considered experts of a kind that need to be consulted, and that by thinking seriously about mitigating harms and better anticipating them, we're going to create more, hopefully we're going to end in a place where there's more equitable outcomes and there's more just outcomes. But I think there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of opportunity to contribute to the work.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think there are a lot of positive things which have come out. If you look at how data science or machine learning has changed over the last 50 years. When I was a student, the only data which was available to us was iris data.
Iris versicolor, virginica, and setosa.
MNIST data. Some of you may not know, but there's a UCI repository of data with a very small number of patterns, limited number of features. So now at least we have the capability. And I think it's not just the algorithms, it's also the computing processors and memory which is available. But I think we have made a lot of advancements. So we have some experiments which can now be done, particle physics and nuclear physics, which could not be done 50 years ago. You couldn't think about that. Space exploration, finding new stars or whatever. So I think there is a positive outcome, But like any technology, there are issues. And I think we need to be aware of it. And I think the other thing is that we also, when I was a student, we learned about this Occam's razor. Start with a simple model and go on to more complex model if you need it to avoid overfitting, right? But now we have forgotten about all that, right? We directly jump at this deep networks, for example, right? 15 years ago, it was SVM. Forget about everything else. SVM will solve the problem. Now, nobody talks about SVM, right? So I think we have to appreciate all these issues, complexity of the algorithm, what is needed for a given data, and of course, the ethical issues.
Yeah, I think the one thing in terms of positive, there are new problems out there for us to solve. So how do you computationalize virtue ethics, right? There are certain ethical theories, and which ones can be computationalized and which ones cannot. So there are also new problems for us to solve. We like to solve problems, right? And so there are new problems for us to tackle. Hard ones, very hard.
So I think, Ankur, thanks for that question, because I think that sort of wraps up our, there are clearly a lot of goods and positives, and hence the community is growing and ever increasing, and there's some really exciting problems, but I also believe we are at a pivotal moment to be thinking and talking about these issues, because if we don't put guardrails now, it may just be too late. And I think at the time of problem statement conceptualization or problem statement definition, if we can ask ourselves what may be certain guidelines, whether it's around ethics or fairness or reproducibility, what things I should be thinking about, versus at the end my model is deployed, I have to pay lip service to ethics, I will pay some lip service now, and that's what's happening today. And let's shift that paradigm to at the time of the problem statement definition. And something clearly that also became evident to me as we talk about democratization and what does it mean? Is it something for another scientist, whether it's in agriculture or environmental scientists or someone in social sciences, sociology, using these tools to draw inferences, or to what Tanya was saying, what about citizens in places who lack data literacy, who lack literacy, for example? and they are impacted by it, and there's trust in democracy, are their voices being heard? So what is the what of democratization? I think we really need to think more about what does it mean. Are we going beyond that interdisciplinary thinking to now really thinking about engagement of citizens, etc.? And because earning the trust of people is important, so maybe in medical community there's this idea of a AAA model where the stakeholder as a patient is involved as a voice. Do we build that AAA model in data science where citizens are involved in the voice, where literacy aspects can be thought about? And to that point, something I guess also for us to debate or think about is the medical community examples were raised quite a bit. Okay, over there we have an FDA that says that this medical device should have this true positive, this false positive rate. We report on side effects get discovered, there are forums about where people talk about side effects, and things happen. Is there a model on that way we say, okay, there has to be a true positive, false positive trade-off, and we report on possible side effects of a modeling construct, because it's proven and tested in the medical domain. So is there things that we can learn from the medical domain in establishing the true positive, false positive trade-offs? And even in the financial domain, FICO score was raised as an example. To me, that's a wonderful example. The way credit score is computed has not changed in 40 years. That goes back to what Anil was saying about Occam's razor. It's logistic regression. There are 10, 12 features I can talk about: your revolving credit, time since last delinquency, etc. And I can show you that I'm not using ethnicity, age, or gender, or zip code information, so there's no lawsuit on giving loan. So there are models out there which are time and tested. So instead of us reinventing the wheel, perhaps we should, and that's where what and how we really have to define more from that perspective. So again, thank you to the panelists for your very thoughtful remarks, and thank you to the audience.
Well, thank you to you for organizing this.
Thank you. And by the way, there is a banquet outside I was supposed to remind you about.
Through its artificial intelligence-based adaptive learning system,